Greetings. This is my latest course entitled How to Teach Reading. Though most students have come across texts in English, they have not been trained to learn reading strategies in order to improve their reading comprehension. Because reading is not just reading fiction. Reading today is reading fiction, non-fiction, scientific, technological texts, and so forth. This course here is intended to teach teachers to help their students develop reading skills. Reading skills are the cognitive processes that a reader uses in making sense of a text. So ESL, EFL, and all the other teachers, therefore, should train their students in the skills that will give them the power not only to comprehend the text, but also to use the text. So it is more effective for students, however, to focus on one reading skill at a time and talk about the application of that skill in a number of text samples. So eventually students will be able to apply the skill unconsciously, so they can call it unconsciously and they can call it up to consciousness and apply it strategically. What we're going to do here, and we're going to examine a number of factors that impede students' reading comprehension. By nature, reading comprehension's difficulties are complex, and reader difficulties may be related to a combination of factors such as biological, cognitive, or behavioral issues. So, while the teacher is just using reading as just a mechanism in the classroom, some factors of reading comprehension or no reading comprehension lie within the reader, but other factors concerning reading comprehension may not lie within the reader. They may lie and they may be found outside of the reader. What's important is the realization that reading comprehension outcomes may be affected by a combination of a lack of reading and reader proficiency. If you do not control the reader proficiency, they will continue to read with a poor comprehension. The lack of reading comprehension and reading comprehension outcomes may also be affected by problems themselves within the text or heavy task demands that are above reading comprehensions and require from them to use either their schemata or use their prior knowledge or any other things that they have not been taught to use. What is certain is that reading comprehension inherently involves a negotiation between the reader and the text. These negotiations involve the teacher to be able to know and to use in the classroom the reading theories like top-down, bottom-up processing, metacognitive processing, cognitive processing, and consider a whole range of reader and text attributes. The text attributes may apply to this particular reading theory but may not apply to the other. So it is important that teachers are trained properly so they can provide students with adequate support with reading comprehension difficulties and be able to introduce the help and the solution to compensate the many difficulties that they experience in understanding what they read. So throughout this training and during this training, we are going to be discussing all the books I have read to write down this course. The books, the thesis, the master thesis, PhD thesis, articles, encyclopedia, they all are around 220 books and articles and theses and so forth. We will be discussing, for example, the work of Hermida, the work of Marshall, and so forth. While we are going to see how, for example, the different things and the different factors contribute to reading, we are going to see, for example, why reading is so important. We are going to see with the teachers and explain to them and why reading is fundamental to function in today's society. No reading, no progress. No reading, no understanding of today's society. So we're also going to talk about the book of Graeber and Stoller. Reading is fundamental also and is a vital skill in finding a good job. Finding a good job itself requires reading, finding out ads, finding out and understanding the ad, finding out how you apply for the job, and so forth and so forth. Reading also develops the mind. It develops the mind as well as it enables us to discover new things. Reading also develops self-improvement. While you're learning to read, you are improving yourself, and in many ways that your reading comprehension can take you through. Also, we are going to teach teachers how reading prepares to action and how reading exposes people to new things, new invention, how you gain experience from other people, and how you improve focus and concentration, and how it builds stronger thinking skills. Of course you cannot build stronger thinking skills if you're not reading, or if you're just reading for fiction. If you're reading and you understand, and the teacher is able to produce the skills for you to understand any type of text, you produce and you develop stronger thinking skills to understand this text and this text and this text and this text. This text is of this type, this text is of this type, this text requires this particular type of reading, this text requires this particular type of reading because it has this and it has that. It also helps improve focus and concentration. When you're reading, you're developing your focus and you're bringing attention into a central focus and central concentration. We will also talk about how it makes you interesting and attractive when you read something and you understand it, not just read it, and you understand it and talk about it appropriately and adequately. We will talk about Cunningham and Stanovich. From here, we move on to theories of reading. As I said before, theories of reading are indispensable. And anyone who says, I don't need theories of reading, is just a person who is not going to progress. A person who is not going to help their students. A person who is not going to help anything at all. Theories of reading are not just indispensable. They are 99% of the reading comprehension. They produce the tools for the comprehension. So we will be looking at some of the different types of theories, and we will look, for example, at the mental theory and the mental model theory and what it has to offer, and how mental representation of text can be interpreted. We will discuss the work of Uriah, and also we will talk about Pen Sumatra and discuss the books and the work of Gunnings, Payne, O'Brien and Kinch. We will also be talking about different things inside the mental model theory. Inside the mental theory, we are going to build a text model in which we talk about the text-based model and the situation model, as well as many other things and many other. For example, we will talk about reasoning. But in reasoning, we have to explain and understand and teach our students what is disjunctive effect when we are reading. And for example, in teaching the framing effect, the mental model theories also, we need to teach the framing effect, the expectation effect, and the disjunctive effect, as I mentioned before. Then we move on to the traditional theory, the bottom-up model, how the bottom-up model works and how it is given. We will talk about Birch, Anderson, and all the work that are related to the work of Anderson, who developed this sector of the bottom-up model. And in the bottom-up model, we see, for example, that the method bottom-up model is associated with reading and known more as phonics, which requires the learner to match letters and sound in a defined sequence. So we will be talking about books of Gray and Rogers and Samuels and Camille, and we will also see the different types of instructional methods in phonics. For example, the types of instructional methods in phonics, like embedded phonics, phonics through spelling, linguistic phonics, and analytical phonics, and so forth, synthetic phonics, and so forth. Then we go on into the cognitive heart, the heart of the cognitive view, the top-down model. We will discuss the top-down model, how it works, and how it is doing, and why we need to process from top to down, and how it is done. We will talk about Goodman, we will talk about many other authors who have discussed this. And then we will move on to another sector inside the cognitive view. So we are now inside the cognitive views. We will move into another sector of the cognitive view called the interactive model. And the interactive model is a model which requires, this has been developed by Rumelhart, this interactive model needs to combine two different processing methods that we have mentioned above. We will talk about Rumelhart and Darviga and many other authors. So in the interactive models, we are going to discuss several interactions and how these interactions between these two processes take place. Then we move on to the metacognitive model. And the metacognitive model, we will be discussing several factors that are linked to the metacognitive model, like the recapitulation and the many other things, the comprehension monitoring, the metacognitive control, and so on and so on. So while we are going to study the metacognitive model, we need also to study the fix-up strategies. If you find out that you've got some problems and you've identified the reason why the reader is not fixing up and is not negotiating properly the text, then you need to apply in the metacognitive model the fix-up strategies and how they work. What are those fix-up strategies? What do they do? And how to monitor their understanding by using these fix-up strategies. We are also going to talk about, inside the metacognitive model, we are going to talk about the different strategies that are inside the metacognitive model. Metacognition and expertise, and applied to the teacher, applied to the reader, and many other books, as well as how to identify errors in reading comprehension. Then we are going to move into the schema theory. The schema theory is a complex theory and has been proposed originally by Piaget, but has been developed by many others and taken and developed, for example, in the 70s by Richard Anderson, Bartlett, and many other authors. We will talk about them, and we will see how schema theory also implies many things and has many things. Schema theory and reading also requires people to understand and use different schema and different types of schema, which we will study and which we will see how they produce and how they think. For example, we will study the content schema. We will study, for example, the different types, social schema. We will study also the formal schema. We will also study, for example, the linguistic schema, among so many other things. Then we are going to go into the types of reading, because it is not just important to understand the theories of reading. That's too easy. We also need to understand the types of reading that the text requires from the reader. The reader is your student. So we will be looking at some types of reading, like for example the intensive reading. We will look at the intensive reading and what it entails, the extensive reading, what it entails, and many other things, like for example skimming, how to skim, and scanning, that's a reading method as well. And then we go into another bulk. We said before that reading is not just fiction and literature. Reading also is expository text. Expository text represents on its own 90% of the entire texts that exists. For example, the expository texts include biographies, essays, how-to books, encyclopedia, science books, technology books, journals, reference books, experimental books, scientific reports, newspapers, articles, manuals, textbooks, and so on. To see the full list, read Reutzer and Kota. Now we are going to see the difficulties, how reading and expository text have a complete dependence on schemata, and how we are going to apply the schemata that we learned, and the teaching difficulties and the difficulties that are linked to expository text and why they are difficult. Then we move on to another aspect of expository text, the text structure itself. If you do not explain the text structure and the reader cannot negotiate the text structure and understand it, they do not produce properly the comprehension, and they do not have the tools to focus and to understand. So, text structure and how text structure works. There are many types of structures, and how to teach them, and how to teach this. Then you have also to learn, teachers have to learn how to flex the brain of their students, so that they learn some mechanisms in the thinking skills, in the thinking process, in the processing of the information, and so on and so on. And then you've got to teachers have got to teach their students the visual spatial organization of the text. A text is also a visual spatial organization. A text may have maps, may have drawings, may have illustrations, may have this, may have that, and so on. This is the visual spatial organization. We are going to talk about different things in this visual structure. Then we will identify the text structure. How the text structure can be identified. If you do not identify the text structure, you're in for a lot of confusion and probably lots of problems contributing to your poor reading comprehension. So we will see different identifying structures. For example, we are going to see description. That's a text structure. We are going to see, for example, generalization, how it functions inside a text structure. We are going to see enumeration, how the text structure in enumeration functions as opposed to others. And we are going to see, for example, sequence, how a sequence in a text is produced and how to understand it, and what kind of visual spatial organization is required to understand this. We're going to see classification. That's another text structure. We are also going to see many other things. We are going to see, for example, cause and effect and different things. We are going to see compare and contrast and comparison and contrast. We are going to see also cause and effects and many other things that make the text, that makes the structure of the text difficult to understand or easy to understand. Then we have, for example, problem and solution. And then we have, for example, different time order, how a text is arranged according to a certain time. We're going to see, for example, how a text structure is produced as a process, and it is the reader reads it and understands it as a process. Then we move on to the phase called before reading. Before reading is a necessary step. We can't just plunge into the text unless we understand, unless we have a phase called before reading. We will see what we have to do before the reading, what steps are, how we activate prior knowledge, how we activate semantic mappings, and how we produce all of this, how we create the previewing for them, and how we make the warm-up, and how we, before reading, we build up the vocabulary and we create this large chunk called vocabulary building. We will talk about automatic information processing in vocabulary, as well as controlled information processing in vocabulary. We will also move into the big chunk called reading comprehension and understand what is reading comprehension, discover together all the books I have read and discuss book by book and see Myers and Palmer and Snow and many others and understand it. First of all, reading comprehension entails monitoring the comprehension. You've got to monitor this comprehension and not let it go anywhere it wants. Otherwise, it leads you where you are not comprehending the text. You are simply making a wrong interpretation of the text. We are also going to see different sections in the comprehension monitorings and the different texts. Then we go on to decoding and how decoding takes place for the text to be understood and to be fully comprehended. Then we move on to comprehension strategies, how the main idea arranges and makes us understand the text structure. How, for example, comprehension strategy called making predictions enables us to understand and to make predictions before we reach the end of the text, or make predictions based on what the text is asking us in science or in technology. And then we will see summarizing. What are the different strategies for summarizing and what is the summarizing methodology? Then we talk about context clues and how the context clues in the text can help us and is a very good strategy that leads to comprehension. Then we will see the non-verbal clues. Non-verbal clues here, they motivate students to read the text and understand it, because sometimes a clue or just a gesture or a cue or an eye contact or a head nodding or anything that a teacher can do can produce this kind of body language understanding. So we will see those non-verbal context and non-verbal cues. We will also see the other comprehension strategies. What are the other comprehension strategies? And for example, the gallery walk, the discussion groups, the language experience approach, the opinionaire, the problem solving, the inferencing strategy, and the different types of inferencing, the causal inferencing, the instrumental inferences, among many others. And we will also see the questioning strategies and the questioning techniques, how the questionings, the type of questions that you actually develop with the students. And we will see, for example, the display questions, how you make them and how you produce them. And then we'll give you a lesson plan for how to produce the questioning during your class. And then the comprehension strategies and how the visualizing strategy works, how the different other tools, for example, making connections and other tools can help you understand. So, for example, we see how memory and different types of memory connected to reading can also unlock the reading comprehension. So we will talk about working memory, long-term memory, semantic memory, episodic memory, short-term memory, among so many others. We will also be discussing books and many other things. And thank you very much for staying with us. For any information concerning when this course is going to be organized, you've got my email there. Please feel free to send an email and ask and inquire about the organization of this course. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.